Hello, this is Michael Swain, Executive Director of Freedom of Religion South Africa, known as 4SA, with my colleague, Attorney Daniela Ellerbeck, the legal advisor to 4SA, and we are here again to bring you 4SA's weekly update on key religious freedom issues that we've been dealing with this week as we work to protect and promote our right to religious freedom. And this week again, Daniela, we're going to be focusing on the Prevention of Hate Crimes and the Combating of Hate Speech Bill, commonly known as the Hate Speech Bill, particularly after Parliament has met on this bill twice within the last few days, namely on Friday the 4th and today on Tuesday the 8th of November. A little bit of background perhaps on this bill. It is a bill that has been kicking around for a pretty long time now, many years in fact, and we've been very involved as 4SA specifically in addressing the concern that we had with the initial earlier draft of the bill, which had no protection whatsoever for bona fide legitimate religious freedom speech. And again, because this bill is going to criminalize, and this is going to be something that was only known under the apartheid era, hate speech, or what you might say, or what you might express, and that can literally get you into serious trouble, including time in jail. So, Daniela, why don't you give us a little bit of the background and an update on what's happened in these two recent meetings?
So, Michael, as you said, this bill has been around for quite a while. I believe it originated in the department already in 2017, 2018, round about there. And 4SA has been involved from the get-go, promoting that the right to religious freedom needs to adequately be protected in this bill by the inclusion of a religious exemption clause, which the first version of the bill drafted by the department didn't include, and after engaging with 4SA and our constituency, the department included a religious exemption clause, which 4SA still maintains needs to be strengthened to adequately protect our right to religious freedom and freedom of expression. And as you've said, this bill is concerning because it proposes criminalizing speech to a much greater degree than we have ever known in our democracy, and arguably to a much greater degree than was even the case under apartheid government, which is very concerning because we haven't even been in democracy yet with the right to freedom of expression for 30 years. Now, the main concerns that were addressed in the last two meetings centered around the hate speech aspect of the bill, because as the bill's name alludes, the bill deals with two aspects, the first being hate crimes and the second being hate speech. Now, while the hate crimes aspect is disputed by some members of parliament, it is not as controversial as the hate speech aspect, because essentially it proposes a codification of what are already seen as aggravating circumstances in our South African law. So, for example, if you murder someone because they are a woman, and that is your motivating factor, then that will be seen by court as an aggravating circumstance, and you will get a heavier jail sentence than if you weren't motivated by hatred for men, if that makes sense. Now, the hate speech aspect of the bill proposes criminalizing hate speech with a broad definition being given for hate speech. And in the department's latest working version of the bill that it tabled in Parliament on last week, Friday, the 4th of November, 2022, they are proposing, amongst other things, that you should face up to 8 years in jail for committing this new crime of hate speech. Now, Friday's meeting saw the department present its input to Parliament on some of the issues that had been raised in previous meetings with the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee of Justice, who are tasked with working on this bill.
So let's just also remember that this bill makes it easier for you to potentially go to jail for something, you say, than to actually face some form of civil liability, in other words, be obliged to make an apology or to pay a fine. So this is a very significant piece of legislation. And so, yes, as you correctly say, it's now before Parliament, members of Parliament. That means, as I understand it, that it is now before a committee which is comprised of MPs from different parliamentary parties. So it's not as if it's before the whole of Parliament. It's before a committee of members of Parliament, all of whom are now having the opportunity to express their particular views and concerns and ideas and to input into this bill. And ultimately, it will be this committee that will decide when or how or what this bill will consist of as it goes forward into the next phase of this process. So tell us a little bit, what were the main concerns that these members of parliament raised about the hate speech aspects of the bill?
Well, Michael, notably, the issues that were addressed by the department that these MPs had raised in previous meetings included the vast list or the vast number of listed grounds that is being proposed in the bill for one to be found guilty of hate speech, something which the Department of Justice admitted that Parliament should carefully consider in light of the Constitution's Section 36 test to ensure that the bill passes constitutional muster. So for viewers who might want to ask, what is this Constitution Section 36 test? Simply put, Section 36 of the Constitution sets out the factors that the state needs to prove when it limits a constitutional right. So essentially, it's the test that when the state is proposing a law or has made a law that limits a constitutional right, such as in this case, the hate speech bill will limit the right to freedom of expression, which is protected in Section 16(1) of our Constitution. Now, when limiting such a right with the law, the state needs to prove that it passes the factors and criteria set out in Section 36. And if a law fails the Section 36 test, then the right to freedom of expression, for example, in this case, would have been unjustifiably and unreasonably limited by that law, which would make that law unconstitutional and therefore illegal.
So what were then, in light of that, were the specific inputs from the members of parliament today into this particular aspect?
Well, today's meeting saw two members of parliament, firstly, Honourable Horn from the DA, and secondly, Honourable Maseko Jele from the ANC, present their own submissions on the bill to parliament and the department, who also attended the meeting. Honourable Horn's submission, amongst other things, looked at the need for empirical evidence to show that the current laws, as you've pointed out, Michael, for example, the civil laws such as Promotion of Equality, Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, commonly known as the Pure or the Equality Act, which already prohibits hate speech, that civil law is not effective in combating hate speech, and that we need to criminalize hate speech in this country. So his submission looked at the need for empirical evidence to show that our laws aren't working, that we need to criminalize hate speech, especially in light of the Constitutional Court's judgment in Kulani last year, where the Constitutional Court said, amongst other things, that criminalizing hate speech needs to be a last resort. So Honourable Horn, for example, argued that if it's a last resort, we need to know that nothing else is working. And as you've said, currently, if the bill was to pass the way it looks at present, it would be easier to be found guilty of the crime of hate speech and go to jail for up to 8 years than to be ordered to apologize under the Equality Act. Honourable Maseko Jele's submission focused on the need for skin color in addition to race to be a ground for hate speech.
So what then now are the next steps? This is clearly an ongoing process, but where to from here? Just give us a sense of how this is going to roll out as we go forward.
So it's 4SA's understanding that the EFF will also be making a submission on the bill, and that they intend to present this submission at Parliament's next meeting on the bill, which is currently scheduled to happen next week, Friday, on the 18th of November at 9:30. As always, 4SA will post a link to the YouTube live stream of this parliamentary meeting on our Facebook page and on Twitter for those who are keen to watch as the bill progresses. Michael, as you've said, this bill is currently in front of the Justice Committee, which is the committee of the National Assembly, first House of Parliament tasked with working on the bill. And from there, it will go for a vote in the National Assembly, which will be the whole House, whereafter it will go to a committee in the National Council of Provinces. Now, the bill is not currently open for public comment. As we've said, it is currently being considered by the first House of Parliament, and 4SA will continue to monitor the process closely and keep you up to date as it develops.
Well, thank you, Daniela, for monitoring this for us, and thank you for all those who are watching. Please remember as well that we are only able to be these watchdogs, if you like, watchmen on the wall, looking at what's happening because of your voluntary contributions. And we really do want to encourage you. Please support 4SA. We need the financial support. We need the partnerships so that we can continue to fight and to be in the front lines of these battles for faith and freedom. So we appreciate your support. Thank you very much. Until the next time, goodbye.
Good day. This is Daniela Ellerbeck, the Legal Advisor to Freedom of Religion South Africa. Remember to like and share this video, and then click on the subscribe button to make sure you never miss our video updates on vital religious freedom issues.